It's not impossible. Yeah.
What, that I'm a mad woman or that this is my process?
No follow-up questions. Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, pitch harmony. Things happen and word.
We'd like to make things happen in word, yeah.
And which do you want to flip a coin? Do you want to go first this time? Do you want me to go first? How do we want to do this?
I can go
We
first.
should really have a system,
Yeah,
but
that's
we've
totally
never
fine.
had a system.
We've never had a... It would be against our system now to have a system.
Yeah, our system sort of is, we have no system.
No system.
Right.
So, first up, what the OED fuck?
Right?
Right?
It took
Yeah.
me way longer than I'm comfortable really talking about, and yet here I am on a podcast talking about it. And if I'm let's just be real, to stop being angry that I couldn't find things.
Yeah.
There's no
very
reason.
annoying.
Things happen. Designs get modernized. Websites, I mean, I'm pretty sure the online version of the OED has been the same for the last 10, 15 years. And so they updated and did all the things and changed stuff. And I felt personally violenced by that for longer than I'd cared about.
Violenced.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it's
a bit
different.
It's a bit like, like some things are allowed to change and some things aren't. And I kind of feel like the institution that is the OED, and that's what we're talking about here. It's existed for a long time and it doesn't really do anything different now to what it did then, other than different ways of communicating the information that it contains.
Yeah.
So it does feel like quite a big deal when they change it.
It felt a little bit like going, when you go to a different grocery store?
Yeah.
And you have to relearn wherever you're on vacation or you're staying at, you're traveling, or you're closed, or
worse, the supermarket that you always go to changes everything.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It was the same disorienting, now I got to go through down every single aisle to see where everything is before I know where I'm going, whereas as opposed to just following my muscle memory route through the store. Except it was the one you always go to, but the things are all different places anyway, and you're like, it was a betrayal is what it was.
That's kind of how it feels. Yeah. And added to the betrayal, the fact that I couldn't get onto the site for 3 solid weeks. Yeah,
there was that too.
A bit of a blow. But yeah, it's back, and I've got the thing and I can see it again. I also am aware of how ridiculously privileged I sound right now, being like, all this free incredible information that people spend their whole professional lives compiling. I can't look at it. Oh no. So
I had to click twice to look at a thing instead of just once.
To mitigate that somewhat, I should point out that in the intervening period, I bought a dictionary of etymology, an actual real meat space one, like a book made of paper.
Wow.
I bought it second hand.
Nice.
It's pretty awesome. I am enjoying it. And I wasn't really sure what to expect from it. And it's not really what I didn't expect, if that makes... I didn't really know what I was expecting, but somehow it's still not really what I expected, but also it's awesome. Books about language they're a bit like that, aren't they? Sometimes you're like, this book says exactly this thing in the title, especially though, this sort of 16th, 17th century titles, 18th century too, where they are 50 words long. And you find yourself thinking, I know exactly what's in this book. And other times you're like, what? Anyway, None of this has anything to do with the word I'm talking about, other than the fact that it has been a bit of a journey to get to the knowledge that I usually take for granted, which is a bit annoying, but also
Right, yeah.
I get it. Don't be a dick. So the word I'm going to talk about today is a word that is dear to my heart in terms of the action that it describes, because since I was a wee little tiny thing, one of my earliest and fondest memories is of my dad singing, playing the guitar and singing. And this didn't ever happen. Well, I mean, it did happen just with him, but the really, really fond memories I have are of him singing with his friend. And my dad always did the harmonies. And so that was what I wanted to learn as a kid. That was what I wanted to sing along to. I wanted to sing the harmonies. And thus I became that faintly annoying human being who always sings the harmonies, always, even when they're not there. And
Yeah.
Sometimes people want to poke me in the eye. I get that. It's fine. And it's a word that I wondered about. Harmony. So I took myself a little look. I got myself to the OED, finally. And yeah, so this is where I'm going to start. I'll tell you what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start by pressing the right button to get to the right document that has the information I need in it.
Nice.
Yeah, check out me. I know
Beginning
things.
at the beginning.
Well, also interestingly, not what the OED does anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this in the wrong direction. But the very first citation given for harmony, the noun, is a combination or adaptation of parts, elements, or related things so as to form a consistent and orderly whole. Agreement, accord, or congruity. And the citation that's given here is from around about 1533. Others have said that it, the operation of God, is a manner of harmony. And it's funny because in my mind, this is always the secondary sense. I always think of the musical term first and then consider, oh yes, and people also use this word to mean things that all come together to form this consistent and orderly whole.
Yeah.
And in fact, the musical sense of this word is much older than that. Circa 1384, the OED gives it as the combination of musical notes, either simultaneous or successive, so as to produce a pleasing effect, melody, music, tuneful sound. And it says it's the earliest sense in English, and in modern use it's more or less associated with sense 5, which is also that musical definition. So this is the oldest definition of this word. We get Chaucer from around about 1384 describing song is full of harmony, and it continues to have that pretty solid, unchanged sense. The latest citation given in the OED is from 1835, but you know, all much the same idea, the idea of singing or a choir or musical togetherness. So I took myself off to find what was the etymology of this word. And the OED, of course, has a very clearly labelled etymology section. And I found that this is a word that's borrowed from French. I don't know how to pronounce words with H in French, so I don't know
Just
if I'll
with
try.
no H.
I always feel a little bit like cartoon mockery when I try to say French words. So if I say harmonie, I don't know that I'm dispelling that notion.
Somebody told me once, or I read someplace or something, it was in a language course of some variety, where it's actually helpful in terms of pronunciation to think about how someone with a French accent would pronounce a French word. Because and without, so I get what you're saying, where you sound like you're kind of doing kind of a comical voice, but harmonie is how you would say it, because that's why they would pronounce that word, the English word, kind of like that with the French accent. Like that's what accents are, is just hold over from the natural language. So you nailed it. And my understanding is the H never gets anything. The
other thing I should point out is I recently was in Berlin, and I was in Berlin in June, celebrating a friend's birthday, having myself a good old time. And I saw my friend who I was visiting last night, and we were chatting about having been in Berlin. And one of the things that we were talking about was, while we were there, we went to a cafe and I ordered a drink. And the waitress and my friend openly mocked my pronunciation of the German word. Right. And I was sort of laughing because I have in the past, like I do not speak German. I have a handful of phrases, a sprinkling of vocabulary, no grammar whatsoever. Like that's as good as it gets. But the first time I went to Germany, I did sort of think that those phrases meant that I would be like okay, I would be able to do and say certain things. Right. And every single German person that I tried my German on was like, what the fuck? so I don't do that anymore because that's terrible. Yeah. But also it really, really amused me that I was like, I totally know how to say these words. And every German person was like, you do not. No, stop that. This is not communication. So I do kind of feel a little bit insecure about my accentitude because it hasn't always worked well for me in the past. What my friend was saying to me yesterday was he says he's not sure if this is a German-wide thing, but he says that he finds particularly in Berlin that if you're not getting it absolutely 100% right, fuck off, basically. Right. So he's not German, but he does live in Berlin. And he's like, yeah, people literally, you speak to them and they just look at you and roll their eyes. Wow. So yeah, and I get that. Like, I mean, let's face it, the English speaking world is notoriously dickhead based when it comes to tolerating, understanding, and even like allowing people to not speak English. So I kind of feel like that's sort of what's coming to me, but also, you know, whatever. Anyway, so French, harmonie. This is where I got to. And it comes, as many French words do, it comes directly from Latin, harmonia, and then from Greek, harmonia, same word, which means joining, joint, agreement, and then takes on that sense of concord of sounds, music. And it has the stem armo, from the word armos, which means joint. Okay. And armosein, the verb to fit together or arrange. Okay. And I really liked this. I was like, oh, of course, all the pieces fit together. That's what's going on in a harmony. Yeah. That's, you know, sort of pleasing to my mind as well as to my ear. And what I then discovered as I continued researching this word is that there are other senses and other usages that use this sense of joining things together much more literally. So Etym lists, for example, a means of joining, so used to describe ship planks, for example, or the fastenings of a door. There is a fairly obscure and archaic anatomical use that describes two plates of bones that come together at a suture or a seam as being harmony or harmonia. And so this idea of physical things joining together is just as strong. Again, maybe not these days, but that sense is there across the centuries to say if things are joining together, then they are, I suppose, harmonious.
Now, is that fact, the anatomical one? The anatomical one, is that like, because the only place I can think of with my very limited anatomical knowledge where bones would come together at a sort of seam would be the bones of the skull. Like where they kind of close up and seem fused together, as you know, babies famously have the fontanelle without the bone fully fused and over it yet. But is that like sort of is it just for that and other sort of particular natural things, or is it like when a bone fuses back, like a broken bone is fixed and fuses, that's like, or am I overthinking this?
I'm not sure. The OED has 3 citations for this particular usage of the word. The first is from 1615. It says, whatever it is distinguished from the wedge bone by the bastard seam called a harmony, which is accounted for the 9th suture. So it could be that it doesn't specify what it is that's being joined, if you like.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, like the sutures. Usually, you talk about sutures, as you say, when you're talking about the skull, but there are. I'm trying to think of the name of the type of joint. I think it's possibly a synarthrosis. Yes. So joints are categorised. Basically, they're categorised according to how much movement they have. So you have synovial joints, like your knee, where the joint is encased in synovial fluid and they're pretty mobile. Sometimes it refers to the movement, so a hinge joint versus a ball and socket joint. But a synarthrosis is a joint which doesn't allow any movement under normal conditions. So the sutures of the skull would count for that. Gomphoses are the joints where your teeth meet your skull.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
okay.
Yeah, so technically bones are joining together, but they're not joining together with the notion that this joint is going to move. So I guess ideally, a harmony is that, ideally indeed. Okay. I guess a harmony is that kind of bone. The second citation in the OED specifically describes the skull. There are in the skull also many harmonies where the bones are joined together.
Right. Okay.
And the last, 1841, a species of harmony, as it is technically termed by anatomists, 2 plates of the skeleton being accurately and immovably fitted to each other, but without being decidedly fastened together by serrated edges.
Right.
So, yeah.
Cool.
My skeletal anatomy is not something I have had to rely on much lately, so I don't remember if there are any other joints that kind of fit into that loose term. But I do. It doesn't seem to be used. It doesn't seem to be used anymore, which is a bit disappointing because I do like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
However,
I would apologize, but we don't apologize for interruptions around here. And also, I would never do you the disservice of pretending like you wouldn't be fascinatingly enjoyable of going down a anatomical words rabbit hole for a brief stint. So
indeed. Yeah. Like that's I'd say it's at least 60 to 70% of the enjoyment I find in learning about anatomy. So many cool words.
So many cool words.
Just many cool words. Anyway, so cognates galore, because harmony does in fact have a pi root. The pi root is AR, which very pleasingly means to fit together. So we have a word here that's actually stayed very, very stable.
Yeah.
Ironically, given the sense of the joint. And so this AR pi root gives us all sorts of wonderful words. I'm going to start here with the etymon line list, and then I'm going to take you to the University of Texas at Austin, Proto-Indo-European Pocorni Index, blah, 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 blah. You know, all the words that mean that thing.
That one,
which has some extra cool things. So we have words like adorn, alarm, aristocracy, arm. Like, of course. I love this one. Armadillo, an animal that's made out of things that fit together. Armature, armour. All of the words that use that arthro or arthr prefix, which means joint. So things like arthritis, arthralgia, arthropod, arthroscopy, all of those sorts of things. Yeah. We also have article, artifact, artifice, and artist. People who put things together. We have coordination. We have harmony. Inertia and inert. Order, ordinary, ornament, subordinate, and all those words that use the sort of ord, so like primordial, things like that. And I found it really, really exciting to see all these words. Like, there are so many words in that list that make me go, oh, right, of course. And we also have words. So this is the Pocorni Index from the University of Texas at Austin. Armada, a fleet, as in a whole lot of ships joined together.
All joined together, yeah.
Arithmetic, which I liked a lot because it's, again, putting the things together.
Yeah.
We have artiodactyl, which is an even-toed ungulate. Never pass up the opportunity to use the word ungulate. It's just fantastic. Ever. Also, an interesting one, dread. I think dread might merit some further investigation, because I saw it on this list and thought, oh, cool, but I didn't really get much further than that. It also gives us words like kindred, as in being joined together by family.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ratio and ration. Read, to parse the meanings of letters, to put that together. Rhymes and riddles. And very lovely, Theodred, son of Theoden in The Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
I often wonder, I don't know if someone that's involved with the wonderful, wonderful Indo-European lexicon at the Linguistics Research Centre in Texas, I wonder if there's someone there who has a particular love for Tolkien, and that's why Tolkien references pop up so often within the index.
That's awesome.
Or if it's just because Tolkien was such a linguistic badass that, he's there because he's there.
Yeah. I like both of those. I kind of hope it's the first where someone's just, it's their own little tribute.
But so many times, and of course, Tolkien was a linguist and was well aware of what he was doing when he called things the things that he called them. So it's nice that that's being recognised. But I do also quite enjoy the notion that someone is just a mad keen Lord of the Rings fan.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful guy on Instagram. I think his account is called something like Max's Airplane Facts.
Okay.
I'll find him and I'll send him to you. And he's an aeronautical engineer who tells you things about planes while also telling you things about Tolkien. It's amazing. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I also took a look at the American Heritage Dictionary list where we get the same, the same really, really interesting and seemingly quite disparate list of things that all fit together. And where was my other one? Yeah, I really loved riddle. That was one that I liked a lot.
Yeah, that is very neat.
Fit together. And as well as kindred, the American Heritage Dictionary added hatred. So I again, maybe a word that bears more research. But I don't know if this is about bringing things together as much as it is about breaking them apart.
Well, I don't know, because there's this. As soon as you said that, I was like, that makes sense, because you can't have hate without a connection. Like,
yeah, I guess
it's not so much push. Well, no, I mean, if you, it's that whole thing about how, if you hold a grudge, it's someone living rent free in your head type of thing. Like, if you hate someone, it's not a positive being drawn together, but it's nevertheless a connection that's hard. There's a connection there. There's a specific, extremely strong connection. Yeah, it happens to be negative, but you can't actually hate someone you've never met.
But then there's also the saying that it's impossible to hate someone close up.
Oh, that I just don't know that I buy that. I think loads of people hate each other up close. I think you can hate someone up close. I think there are some people you hate more up close than far away. They're okay on the other side of a mountain, but if they're right next to you, boy, now things are getting real. Yeah, I reject that proverb's whole pretense. I don't buy it.
Frankie says relax. Ryan says no.
Yeah, no, I refuse. You relax, Frankie. You take your stupid tie and you go over there.
And I will hate you at whatever distance I see fit.
Yeah. But bear in mind that my affection for you is inversely proportionate to your distance from me.
And so it's rather beautiful that it's rather beautiful that the notion of harmony has brought us to the notion of hatred, given that every single definition in the OED describes agreement or accordance or pleasant. The word pleasant is used several times. Peaceableness, concord, an aesthetically pleasing effect, a tuneful sound. But I mean, well, it's maybe the most human being thing of all, isn't it? We can get from there to hatred any day of the week.
Yeah. Bringing it back to that, the very first sort of musical definition, one of the things that I love most about music, and this is one of those things where sometimes if I get too far in my own head about it, it gets very through the looking glass in my brain. But the idea that it's possible to have a dictionary definition that relies on the concept of pleasing is slightly weird to me, because it's bizarre to have an objective definition that relies on what would normally in any other context be almost purely subjective. But it constantly blows my mind that music is one of those things that I don't know, it seems fundamental. It's not as though there aren't differences in musical taste, obviously, or differences in, you know, the cultural production of music, and different cultures have very different musical traditions. But like a major third or an octave, it is recognized and it is appreciated anywhere. It's irrespective of people's cultural backgrounds anywhere around the world. It does feel universal.
Yeah, so when I said I realised that there's a whole aspect of this word that I've kind of neglected to mention so far, which is, and this kind of relates to, I was talking about this with my friend who I was in Germany with, about the differences that I've kind of experienced in my life regarding let's sing together for fun at a party, which is usually what was happening when my dad and his friend would play and sing,
right,
and the music of music lessons and school and music exams and all that sort of thing. And don't get me wrong, I learned a lot of stuff in the latter environment, but I enjoy the former so much more.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that is the notion, like exactly what you're talking about, because the rules of harmony are as established a concept. I mean, almost as long as people have been writing music down, essentially, there's been this notion of things you can do and things you can't do, and I sort of love it that they're horseshit. It's sort of like prescriptivists in grammar and and in language. I quickly googled the rules of harmony while we were talking. So number one, no consecutive fifths. I love the way consecutive fifths sound. I used to get into trouble from my organ teacher all the time because I'd be improvising before the service would start, and at the end he'd sort of raise his eyebrows and go, "You're very fond of a consecutive fifth, aren't you?" And I would say, Yes, I am. So yeah, no consecutive fifths, no consecutive octaves, no hidden or exposed consecutives, no dissonant leaps, sevenths, augmented or diminished intervals. Choose small intervals, leading note resolves to the tonic. The soprano line should have an interesting melody. The alto and tenor lines should not move about much at all. Double the root or fifth in root position chords. Double any note in first inversion chords. Double the fifth in second inversion chords. Double the third in diminished chords. Double the third with care in other chords.
With care.
Never leave out a figured note. Never leave out the root or third. Never overlap parts. Stay in the accepted voice ranges and don't put more than an octave between the upper voices. For pretty much every single one of those nevers, I can think of a really, really fantastic example that uses exactly that thing that we're told never to do. But you're right. I once upon a time, in the land of historical white dudes, music was only what people said it was allowed to be.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah, I think the thing that I think about that might be an example of what I'm talking about is I saw it was a talk. I don't know that it was a TED Talk because there was a panel and it might have been before TED Talks were really a thing. But Bobby McFerrin, the guy that wrote Don't Worry, Be Happy.
Don't Worry, Be Happy.
He was sort of explaining this kind of general concept of how there's something very innate and universal about music, and he was talking about just the major scale, and what he did is he had the whole crowd singing along with him. Just he would guide them on the first note, and he would physically jump to the left or right at sort of more or less preset intervals to indicate which note he was on. But then eventually after he did the first sort of the middle three of the scale he was doing, he could just jump and he could skip notes and the crowd would just follow and would hit the right notes of the scale, and everyone was singing. It's a big group, so you get the amalgamation, you get the law of averages and stuff, but it was just, his whole point was, people say, oh, I can't sing, or I don't have good pitch, or I can't this, I can't that. And he was like, nope, everyone does. Music is inherent. And here's how we're going to show it to you. I'm just going to jump around on stage and you're going to all be singing all the right notes in this scale, and you're going to be a choir. And it was like, and it worked. Like, so anyway, I don't know. This might be a better conversation for like around a campfire or at a pub table or something. Although most are, but.
Do you feel like you're missing a beer right now?
Yeah, kind of. But anyway, I love that.
Yeah, I guess the thing I like best about discovering that the word harmony means to join together is that's exactly what music does. It joins me to the memory of my father. It joins me to experiences that I had growing up as a kid, as an adult. It joins people who who consider the same things pleasing to other people who consider those same things pleasing. And that's what it's always meant. Never changed, and hopefully never will.
That's cool. I like it. And this is, again, dear listener, I promise you that at no point in this show's history, with the exception of, and I'll cop to this, the very first episode we did, we knew which words each other was doing. Although I think that we had both forgotten what word the other one was doing when we actually came to record the very first episode we ever did. But
that sounds like us.
At no point since then, one of the hallmarks has always been sort of more or less unspoken rules, is that neither of us has any idea coming in what the other one's going to be bringing to the table. So, and
there's been a couple of times where we've sort of discussed the logistics of this, and are there times where it's actually appropriate for us to share that? And for some unknown reason, we both feel very firmly, no, that's not a thing we're ever going to do.
Yeah.
We don't confer beforehand. Part of the joy of this is not knowing what you're going to talk about and you not knowing what I'm going to talk about. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And every now and then we get an episode, like the episode we did where we did garlic and ginger in the same episode for some
that was awesome.
Absolutely impossible reason. And today we're doing harmony and we're doing pitch. So
oh, amazing. Now that is a pleasing sound.
It sure is. So
two words which join together. How gorgeous.
Wild. So this word pitch was actually suggested by a relatively new, comparatively new Patreon supporter named Fiona, who...
Yay, Fiona. We love you and all our Patreon guys. But thank you so much.
She sent... Yeah. Yes, thank you all. And she sent a message and just kind of said, basically, what the hell's going on with pitch? Why is it, it pitch black, pitch is in tar, pitch is in singing, pitch is in throwing a baseball. Like, what is happening right now? How are all these things the same? What's going on?
And I went, just to squeeze.
Yeah, and I read that message and I went, oh, which is a noise I make a lot. just in general in life, but also doing this. So I decided to venture into the newly bamboozling OED and find out. And I really like what I found out. Because what I found out is that pitch, the two big headlines for pitch is that pitch and pitch are two completely different words entirely.
I love when this happens. Amazing.
They're absolutely different words.
Fantastic. Bring it on.
And what we also have in the two pitches is we have an example of both a verb being nouned and a noun being verbed.
Ooh.
So, again, not like anyone who's listening to us after these years is going to be among the crowd that says, oh, you can't verb nouns, because you can. But, again,
some people really enjoy masochistic listening, I guess.
I guess, and
I'd like to think there's at least one person out there who listens to us because they hate us and everything they say.
And you know what? Up yours. So
suck it.
Yeah, exactly. The rest of you, we love you guys. It's
I love the hate listeners too. That's kind of wonderful.
No, that's true. Yeah. See, there's that hatred connection thing. Yeah.
I'm bad at being mean to people.
It's so to begin at the beginning, we start with pitch, the earliest noun form of the word, which is in early Old English. So we're talking like end of the first millennium, very, very old word. And
crazy
the definition,
shit a long time ago.
Yeah. The definition the OED gives for this noun sense of this word pitch is, quote, a sticky, resinous, black or dark brown substance, hard when cold and semi-liquid when hot, that is obtained as a residue from the distillation of wood tar or turpentine and is used for caulking the seams of ships, protecting wood from moisture, etc. So that's the pitch that is as old as time. That's that one. Now, interestingly...
And that kind of makes sense because, you know, it comes from trees and shit.
Yeah, it's a stuff. And all the early stuffs have been very useful for a very long time. So we've had names for the early stuffs for a while. We love Etymonline, but every now and then there's something that comes up that I'm just like, I don't know. Because what Etymonline has to say about this is that the word was, quote, improperly applied to sap from pine bark from the late 14th century. But at the same time, the OED has a sense of, quote, the resin or crude turpentine which exudes from some coniferous trees. And it also dates that sense to the early Old English period, which is obviously way older than the late 14th century. So, like, Ryan, I don't know how to reconcile those.
It doesn't come from trees and shit.
Well, no, but it does though. So I don't. What I'm saying is I don't understand why Etymonline says that, but I haven't been able to find out exactly why, because it just sort of is there. But if anyone's doing any follow up and being like, hey, what about this? It's like I saw that. It doesn't super compute to me. Because later on, like much later, it was actually inverted so that pitch could sometimes refer to the trees themselves.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that usage before, like pitch trees.
Exactly, yeah. So it's, and then later on, and it's within like sort of 20 years on either side of the year 1400, it was expanded to have a sort of a figurative sense, which is any of various similar dark viscous substances of mineral origin, so asphalt, bitumen, any of that stuff. Sure. The stuff that didn't come from trees is called pitch because it resembles the stuff that was ultimately from turpentine and wood tar and stuff like that.
Cool.
And then so this is the noun that got verbed, which again makes a certain amount of sense because you start with a stuff, and then the things you do with that stuff become the name of the stuff themselves as well. You're stuffing those things. So to coat something with pitch was
Ryan,
just to pitch something.
When is it you're publishing this paper?
It'll be at a symposium later this month.
You know, I kind of wish academia was couched in those terms sometimes. Like, that makes perfect sense.
I just like to have absolutely no question whatsoever about whether or not I am formally trained in linguistics. I like to have that right out there. I don't want any trouble. You know, just nobody's mistaking me for an academic in this field, so that's just the way I like it.
Just doing the thing, talking about the things with stuff.
When you do things with stuff, sometimes that stuff becomes the name of the things, and then you're just stuffing the stuff onto other stuff. So
yeah.
And then we get another figurative use of the verbed form of that, as in to coat something with pitch. And again, seems like a perfectly natural transition. Like sort of the 1600s, it started, or by the 1600s, it had started taking on a figurative use as to envelop in darkness or to make dark as pitch.
Oh, nice.
So like either by covering something or extinguishing lights or whatever was to make it dark as pitch. The clouds would pitch something if it was a particularly bad storm. That kind of idea.
Oh, I wonder if that you might be about to talk about this. I was going. What popped into my head was the notion of a pitched battle.
Well, we're going to get to that. So
okay, I will. In that case, shut my puss.
While we're still on this form of pitch, this is obviously where pitch black and pitch dark come from. The adjective phrases like black as pitch, dark as pitch, pitch black, whatever is from this side. So etymology wise, this word pitch comes from the Germanic side of the family tree, which makes sense given how long it's been around. Mm-hmm. And it hits all the favorites, old/middle, high/low German, old Icelandic. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of good ones. But slightly weirdly, and every now and then this happens, and I kind of like when this happens, is that even though we kind of often, or at least I often split sort of English origins into either Germanic or Latin, like that's kind of in my head, that sort of those are the two broad categories of where words come from, either like the Latin family, French, Romance languages, or Latin directly, or the Germanic sort of Saxon Old English side of things. But in this case, when you go back far enough, you do get back to Latin for this one. And pretty much all the way through, again, it makes sense because it's a stuff that's been used for forever, because it's a natural stuff that's very useful. So all the way through, it's basically been the same. It's been a one-syllable word. It started with the p sound. Usually it's ended with a hard K or C, like a pick instead of pitch. But it's been a one little succinct word that has essentially always meant the same thing in all of its different Germanic language families and everywhere else, and all the way back to Latin. And this circles back to the conversation about trees, because apparently the classical Latin word for a spruce tree or pitch tree was picea, however you pronounce that, Picea, was classical Latin for a spruce tree or a pitch tree. So again, the fact that it was erroneously ascribed to like wood sap seems to be maybe a bit harsh, because the classical Latin seems to have had no problem in just being like, yeah, that's a pitch tree, because that's where we get that stuff that we use from.
The tree that the stuff comes from, yeah.
Now, interestingly, Etymonline and the OED reference an Indo-European root for this word, but neither of them identifies it, and I can't find it anywhere.
Oh, nuts. I hate when that happens.
So I don't know where it is or what it is, but we know what the context that I was able to find it was, that it's sort of like this is the Latin word, it came from this Greek word, and that came from a shared origin point with these other words. So the Old Church Slavonic, woo,
Yay.
And Old Russian words for the same stuff, they're very similar. They're a little bit longer. They've gone through a little bit more transitions, but so there is a pi root at the beginning of it all. I don't know what it is. but it also branched off into the Slavonic and Slavic and Eastern European and Russian families of languages as well.
Okay.
The other thing that Indo-European root donated to antiquity is the ancient Greek word, which is for the same stuff, which is pisa, which in turn gave English the apocalyptically underused word piss asphalt.
Piss asphalt?
P-I-S-S-A-S-P-H-A-L-T. Like asphalt, but with piss at the beginning, to make piss asphalt a semi-liquid bituminous substance. And
that's amazing.
The fact that that word was one that I had to wait till I was 41 years old to learn is not fair. But here we are.
Sometimes it upsets me that there are so many incredible words out there that no one seems to be using.
I know.
Of course, like, someone knows the word piss asphalt. That's not us. But, you know, why didn't they tell us, basically?
Yeah. Like, I rely on you people to tell me these things sometimes, and someone's fallen down on that job.
Anyway. I can't know all the words always.
No. We need some help with this. So that's one pitch. So the other pitch is it might be the biggest. I would love to have seen what this looked like on the old OED layout, where it was a little easier to get a sense of just the sheer scale of a word and its number of senses and uses. But
yeah,
this one, the OED lists 25 different senses for this word. And
wow.
A lot of those have subsections. So for anyone who hasn't been on the OED online, the OED website recently after the redesign, the way they have it organized is they still have everything in chronological order, but rather than it just being kind of, granted, a bit of an antiquated website setup where it's literally just a scrolling page that goes on forever and they're just labeled in order and stuff. They now have it in like kind of neat little nested bullet point lists that you can expand and collapse again as you go. So,
I don't approve.
Harumph. But
harumph, yeah.
And I'm talking like
etc.
25 sort of top level senses, and then many of those have like between 2 and 5 subgroups underneath them. And anyway, the idea is there's a ton of uses for this. So the fact that we've eliminated the pitch as in tar and pitch black from the original confusion about just how many things pitch could mean, we've not actually gone that far into narrowing it down. So these 5, yeah, and this was kind of tough. So this is going to be like a bit of a whirlwind because obviously we can't really go into every single one of these, although they are very interesting. So if you have access to the OED online, I would advise you to do it because it's neat. But
I find myself more and more impressed by Fiona's question.
Yeah. So these 25 senses fit very broadly into 5 sort of main categories is what they've sort of been lumped into. And then in roughly chronological order from the oldest to youngest, and the oldest in this case is like it's showing up in the early 1200s. So category 1 is to thrust in or fix in or set in place. Number 2, to cast, throw, or fall forwards. Number 3, to slope or descend. Number 4, to fix the relative place, position, level, etc. of a thing. Or 5 is like miscellaneous technical uses. And these ones are very technical. Like they're really, really specific, and they're like, yeah.
Interesting.
So
already interesting. Take it away, Mr. Paulson.
So those are the 5. So rather than go through, like I say, go through every single one of these senses, I'm going to kind of hit the highlights and do like greatest hits type of run through. So to pitch something, like in a baseball sense, like to throw, like pitch a javelin or pitch a ball or something like that, that shows up by the late 1300s, and it falls into category 2, which is the cast, throw, fall forwards, that idea.
Yeah,
the fighting sense of, like, as you were bringing up, to pitch battle, that comes from the 4th category, which is to fix the relative place of something. You pitch a battle by first establishing in the old days, it was establishing the lines, right? Everyone would line up and form ranks, and that's where they would pitch the battle. But the first step in pitching the battle is to nail it down.
I love how war has rules.
Yeah.
I mean, which immediately makes me think of, this is bowling, Donnie, it's not Nam, there are rules. But,
Exactly.
there are indeed
awesome.
rules.
So for number one, to thrust in, fix in, or set in place, that one I found really interesting because one of the uses of pitch, as I was really kind of thinking about how many different ones I could just think up, was to pitch a tent. And
I didn't think of that at all.
And to pitch a tent comes from the very first and the very oldest uses, which is to thrust in, fix in, and set in place, because part of pitching a tent,
of course it does,
is to drive the tent pegs into the ground to secure the tent to the ground. So pitching a tent doesn't really have anything to do with constructing the tent. It's once you've secured the ground, you've pitched your tent.
That's cool.
Which I thought was neat. And that fourth category, back to the pitch battle, that's also where the musical pitch comes in. To fix the relative place position, you find a pitch or you hit a certain pitch. Someone who has perfect pitch can always find the certain place for their voice where they want it.
Yeah, that's so cool. When you were reading out those definitions, I was like, sweet. Because I don't know, I guess I've just never really thought about it like that before, but it particularly makes sense given Bobby McFerrin's I'm going to jump this way and you're going to sing with me.
Yeah.
Like, he's literally placing the, using relative position to fix what the notes are, and everybody knows that works.
Yeah, exactly. So that was in number 4. So there's all this. So the pitch of a roof, the angle of that the roof is built on, that's from the number 3, the slope and descend side of things.
I literally was writing about that about 3 weeks ago at work.
Yeah, so what that one was that's the noun verb, right? So originally, you would pitch down a hill to just make up one in the slope and descend. So, but eventually it became an adjective, I guess, from that to the describing the pitch of something. But it's from that original kind of third category of to slope or descend, and you get that downward motion type of thing.
Super cool.
Etymology-wise, so this is like... Etymology-wise, this one's a lot shorter. The other one had a longer etymology story and fewer uses. This one's the inverse of that.
All the uses.
Tons of uses, and we end up with of uncertain origin. Which... But not to worry. Remember that thing I said about I want nobody to mistake me for an actual qualified academic in any of this stuff? Well, buckle up, sunshine.
This is my favorite bit.
Because here we go. So just to go, we'll go through the academic stuff first. So first of all, the OED does not even hint that there might be a connection between these two words, pitch. It doesn't make reference. Okay. It doesn't even go so far as to say there isn't one. It just doesn't even recognize the possibility. It's not on their radar at all that they're connected. But what it does is it posits that it is, quote, perhaps the reflex of an unattested Old English weak class 1 verb, pican, or, quote, perhaps originally a causative formation from the stem of the first verbal sense of pick, i.e. meaning to cause to pierce. However, that version of that verbal sense of pick is not itself attested from the Old English period, and it is uncertain whether its stem vowel was long or, as required for this formation, short. End quote. That's what an academic does with this. That's what a real scholar does for the etymology of this word. Now, what I do with this word... This is
how we do it.
What I do with this word is I look at the earliest OED citation for this form of pitch where they're talking about to thrust in, fix in, set in place. And what it says is it makes a reference to something called a childing pine. And I go, ooh. Well, a pine is a coniferous tree very closely related to spruce that produces a very distinctive sap, which would be used for all this stuff as well. And so it would have been a pitch tree. And then I go, pine and spruce trees are often very straight trunked, and they'd be great for making pegs or things that would look certainly like pegs or posts or spears. So maybe someone did make an analogy to that, and they started with pitch trees, which is way earlier, because the first pitch is early Old English. All of these senses are around by the 1200s, but we're still talking several centuries later. Pitch number 2 enters the scene. So
that's super cool.
I can't help but think that maybe there is a possibility, because of how just natural language development being what it is. It doesn't seem impossible to me that someone, they were using the word pitch to describe these trees. They were also making these posts out of these trees and just being like, oh, use the pitch trees to secure that thing, or use the posts, use some pitch posts for that, or something like that. And maybe that happened. I don't know. But again,
that's very lovely.
Pure speculation. And I mean, probably utterly false, but
you build roofs out of pine and spruce, so you certainly can do. You put up flagpoles. You build masts of ships with all of these. Yeah, like it's. I feel like the earliest uses of trees were pretty influential. Influential in a lot of different ways in the lives that people must have led in those sorts of times. I think it's entirely possible to consider that the name. Let's go back to our academic jargon. The name for the thing that does the stuff, when that thing does a lot of stuff, I think it's reasonable to assume that name might pop up in a variety of different etymological branches. Boom, boom.
Nice.
But yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, so again, what are we doing here if we're not going to have a little bit of, needless, completely unacademic fun at the expense of people who've dedicated their lives and professional careers to this very study?
I'm sure those guys don't hate us. Definitely
They're fine. They're just fine. So, I mean, we're getting long in the tooth time wise, but the other thing, just to I'm not going to go into it too much because it's a lot, but you remember how I said there were 25 uses of the verb
yes
form of the second form of pitch? Well, there are 59 meanings listed in the OED's entry for the noun of pitch.
Holy shit.
Only 9 of which are labeled obsolete. And It's used in, it's like they have their the sort of fact sheet thing comes up in the Middle English period around 1150. The uses in the subject usage categories that it has is aviation, nautical, mechanics, cricket, games, geology, architecture, music, mining, weaving, agriculture, birds, life sciences, economics and commerce, and fishing. Those are all the different categories into which the various meanings of the noun pitch can be clumped. So,
I mean,
there's that.
Is this maybe the most ubiquitously magpie word ever?
It's wild. It's nuts.
Yeah.
The whole thing is nuts. It doesn't make any sense. But so again, if anyone wants to, it's all there. But it's essentially the ultimate. It's the thing I like about this, and I like about this Fiona's question on this, is that it's an example of both the fact that it can be a case where it's just 2 different words, but that doesn't all the way explain why there's a million different things. And the answer is because of how language works. Like, it's sort of a perfect encapsulation of how you can do this stuff, you know, like when I'm speculating over maybe the two are related, because maybe some guy just walked up and said, oh, this is now this, and that's fine.
And that's all it takes.
But that's all it takes. That's how you get from, you know, the five senses of the verb, you know, to thrust in, to cast down, to slope down, to fix the relative place. You can it doesn't take a million joules of energy to work out how those things could be connected, and how you can kind of trace how that change could work.
Here's a little thing that I meant to, in fact, I have two things that I meant to tell you that I have not yet told you.
Okay.
The first is that I discovered something beautiful last week, which is that the word burpee, do you know what a burpee is?
Like the horrible exercise?
No one ever describes the exercise without using something along the lines of horrible, terrible, awful. A friend of mine described it as a brutal piece of shit designed to psychologically break people. I think were her exact words.
Absolutely.
It's an eponym.
Sorry, what?
Burpee is an eponym. Yeah, I knew that this would make you happy.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, you know how we like an eponym in the wild, but the burpee was named after Royal H. Burpee, who earned a PhD in applied physiology from Columbia University in 1940 and completed the burpee exercise as part of his PhD thesis. So the next time, if you're a going to the gym personal trainer sort of dude, or if you're a CrossFit sort of person and burpees are a part of your life, then the next time you find yourself hating this exercise, you can actually literally curse Dr. Burpee himself. So that was the first thing I was going to tell you, because I found that incredibly awesome. But just today, while research, it's a long story as to how I got there. However, I discovered that there is a small town in England called Saffron Walden. The reason that Saffron Walden attracted my attention is because there is a well-known hymn tune named Saffron Walden after the town. And I was looking at the Wikipedia page for Saffron Walden, and I discovered that a Swedish race driver called Stig, I've forgotten his surname, Stig, Swedish last name, apologies, that's a terrible use of half information, lived in Saffron Walden along with his son, who was also a racing car driver. And I thought to myself, oh, interesting. I wonder if there's any connection between the Stig on Top Gear and this guy Stig, who was a Swedish race car driver who came to settle in the UK.
I was working so hard not to bring up Top Gear first, because I know how you feel about it. Yeah, but yeah. I want you to know the level of my respect for you was that you literally talked about a race car driver named Stig, and I kept my damn mouth shut. I'm
very impressed, Ryan. This is definite progress.
I think I might have pulled something doing it, but...
So, of course I looked it up, because isn't the internet wonderful?
Yes.
And discovered that actually my first kind of language sense recollection was right. Because for me, Stig will always, first and foremost, always refer to the children's book, Stig of the Dump. Do you know this book?
I don't know this book.
It is, as Google tells me, it is a children's novel by Clive King, which was first published in the United Kingdom in 1963. Now, the best way to describe Stig of the Dump to someone who is not familiar with the book, it is a much-loved children's classic, but it basically is, it's sort of like the plot of California Man / Encino Man, depending on which side of the pond you're on, whereby an ordinary kid discovers a cave person living nearby. Okay, Stig lives in a dump, hence the name, and so any reference to anything Stig shaped, related, or named makes me think of this book, which I read when I was a kid and very much enjoyed.
Right.
However, what I found, and this is why I'm talking about Top Gear, which you know I dislike intensely.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that intense dislike is Jeremy Clarkson, who is a terrible, terrible human being.
Right.
And what I discovered is that the Stig in Top Gear was named for a slang word that Clarkson and his producer, they both attended Repton, which is a very famous public school in England. Roald Dahl also attended Repton. And
for North American listeners, public doesn't mean the same thing here.
It does not. No, it means it's a private, very expensive, very oldie. I mean,
very much not a public school.
But if you're a Tory politician and you didn't go to Eton, there are not that many other options as to where you would have gone to school.
Right.
Repton is one of those potential options.
Got it.
Anyway, while they were at Repton, Stig was used as a slang word to describe someone whose clothes, hair and appearance were not up to scratch. As in, Stig of the dump. As in,
okay.
You look like you live in a dump. Which is a mean-spirited, shallow, horrible use of the name of the character from the book, and entirely what I would expect of someone like Jeremy Clarkson, based on what I already know about Jeremy Clarkson. So it could have been a nice, cosy little anecdote about how a racing car lived in a little English town, and thus they took the name of their mysterious character from that driver. But no, instead, it's just rich Tory twats being arseholes.
And Amy's world makes sense again.
Like, I knew I hated this show for a reason. Oh yeah, there it is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's I like.
Outside of both harmony and pitch, those are two things that I, as I say, as soon as I learned these things, I immediately thought I must tell Ryan about this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Those make perfect little epilogues for the episode as a as a sort of sorry we're only doing a monthly podcast now. It looks like
yeah, I know
type of thing, but it is what it is. But yeah, so pitch and harmony.
Pitch and harmony. That's absolutely brilliant. I love it.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.